I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. Grab your popcorn as Currents goes to the movies. We'll look at faith on film through the lens of Alfred Hitchcock.
Try to highlight a director and relate them to the struggle of people to believe and have a good Catholic conscience.
And happy birthday, church. Bishop DiMarzio talks about Pentecost.
But it is a very important feast, obviously. It marks the coming of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles, 50 days after Easter.
Well, good evening, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. Well, it has been quite the week for news, wouldn't you say? From an imploding presidential run to an epic Twitter fail that saw a congressional hotshot, become the easy target of potshots. And we won't be forgetting this week's scorching heat anytime soon. It smothered the Northeast and had most of us rooted in front of any air conditioner we could find or get a hold of. And while these stories do continue to develop and we continue to follow them, today we wanted to take just a bit of a break anyway from the scandals and the politics and, well, just go to the movies. Except in this theater, you'd find more pews than popcorn. Last May, Immaculate Conception Parish in Astoria, Queens hosted a film festival to rival Tribeca's. There was a singular focus to these screenings, though, the cinematic genius that is Alfred Hitchcock. Now, the festival, themed Alfred Hitchcock and the Catholic Conscience, explored the legendary filmmaker's movies through the lens of faith, particularly the Catholic faith. And while Hitchcock may be better known as director of The Birds or Psycho, we all know those movies, right? Well, what you may not know is that he was a devout Catholic. And if you looked hard enough, you could discover threads of his faith in reel after reel.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. Each one has somebody that he'd like to get rid of. So, they swap murders.
We thought we would do this, this film festival dedicated to three of the films of Alfred Hitchcock, who was Catholic, and they were all showing Hitchcock's essentially Catholic vision of things, of good and evil, and the importance of conscience in decision-making.
For Hitchcock, in his way of looking at things, there is good and there is evil, clearly. And sometimes evil can latch onto you by accident almost.
Strangers of the Train is about two people that meet on a train. One is a tennis player, the other one is just a ne'er-do-well person who is really a sociopath. He hates his father, and the tennis player he knows is trying to get a divorce so he can remarry. So he says, why don't we just swap murders?
It was very quick, Guy. She wasn't hurt in any way. It was all over in no time. I knew you'd be surprised.
So, and the whole film is him trying to free himself from this deal that he never made, but who Bruno wants him to keep, whether he likes it or not. So it is the forces of good versus the forces of evil.
I thought he'd be interested to know he has a lunatic son.
Well, then am I correct, Mr. Haynes, in assuming that you have no intention of going ahead with our arrangement?
None whatsoever.
Was Bruno supposed to have like a mental illness or something?
I think the director is using it in a him as a more moral agent.
There was a few screws loose with Bruno, but he could choose. It was clear that he's smart, he could choose one thing over another. I think sometimes people just don't believe evil exists. People do choose evil things. There is mental illness, and it does change the perspective of people. But it doesn't explain everything. As soon as there is a possibility of choice, there's a possibility of moral action.
I thought it was a great film during this Easter season, simply because it talks about the light and the darkness of life.
I was just walking on the street, talking on my phone, and I saw the poster placed outside the door.
The two movies we've seen so far have had kind of what you can call a happy ending. The positive side wins. The good triumphs over the evil.
Some people are not really ready for going to church on Sunday and becoming. There were people here, I'm sure, that weren't even Catholic. it takes a lot for people to get to the point where they see the good, the evil, the struggle, the salvation of God. Sometimes when you see a film, it's an easier way for them to appreciate it, to go for it.
No one can tell a story like Hitchcock could, and we'll have more later on in the show. But stay tuned, there is much more currents on the way. Alabama's governor signs a tough new immigration bill into law. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up a little bit later, more Hitchcock and the story of a young lady who has a shadow of a doubt. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Well, around 60 local churches and houses of worship will have a special intention this weekend. They'll be praying for New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg to reverse what they say are immoral cuts to city schools. One of the pastors taking part told the Daily News that the religious leaders are going to pray that the Lord will touch the heart of the mayor and city council. Bloomberg has said that the city must cut 6,100 teachers from the payroll. A spokesman for the mayor told the News that the root of the problem is the unprecedented cuts to education funding from the state. That's something that the religious leaders, that he says that those religious leaders acknowledged in a letter to the mayor. Well, New York Congressman Peter King, meanwhile, has announced a second in a series of hearings looking at the radicalization in the American Muslim community. Now, in a statement, King says the latest hearing will look at the problem of radicalization of U.S. Muslims in prisons in this country. Ahead of the first hearing, which took place in March, protesters for both for it and against it took to the streets of New York. Elsewhere on Capitol Hill, the website lifenews.com reporting that a group of senators is defending Indiana's law that cuts federal funding from Planned Parenthood. In a letter, the senators say the threat to cut all Medicaid funding from Indiana is a significant departure from Medicaid's long-standing practice of letting the states set standards for medical providers. Now, the letter, which was orchestrated by Senator Orrin Hatch, was sent to President Obama's Medicaid administrator. Well, meanwhile, a controversial immigration measure in Alabama will go into effect later this year. Governor Robert Bentley signed the bill into law on Thursday. The bill allowing police to check the immigration status of people they think may be in the U.S. illegally. It also requires Alabama to check the citizenship of students and penalizes businesses that knowingly employ undocumented immigrants.
It is a tough bill. It is the toughest bill in the country, but we wanted a tough bill.
Arizona and Georgia had already enacted similar immigration laws. U.S. bishops called the Arizona law draconian. Well, turning now to Japan, where the Catholic relief organization Caritas has launched a new emergency program to help earthquake and tsunami victims. Caritas says the new program will provide survivors with food as well as other aid items, counseling, and help getting back to work. The program will run through September at a cost of close to $4 million. The magnitude 9.0 earthquake and resulting tsunami that struck Japan back in March killed 15,000 people. And the disaster has led to a call by many to focus on clean energy. As we hear now from Rome Reports, it is something Pope Benedict talked about when he met with 6 new ambassadors to the Vatican.
During a meeting with 6 new ambassadors to the Vatican, the Pope talked about the role of technology, including its benefits, limitations, and even dangers, like the recent case involving Fukushima's nuclear reactors. He said relying on technology as the main source for answers, progress, and fulfillment doesn't nurture one's spirituality or the divine elements of the world. Benedict XVI called for scientists to follow ethical standards in their investigations and in their work. He also said technology should find a moderate balance in helping Mother Nature follow the path God intended it to follow. To reach this goal, the Pope said not only scientists but also governments have a responsibility to promote people's spiritual dimension and not ignore it. That includes the protection of human life, as well as the rights of current and future generations.
Well, the Vatican is clarifying the penalty for taking part in unauthorized ordinations. In a text published today in the Vatican newspaper, the Pontifical Council for Legislative Texts says the normal penalty for those ordinations is automatic excommunication. The council says, though, that there are certain circumstances where automatic excommunication would not apply. Catholic News Service, which is reporting the story, points to recent ordinations in China in which bishops loyal to the Vatican were said to have been forced to participate. Well, the head of the Catholic Church in Libya is denying claims that he is sheltering Muammar Gaddafi. An Italian newspaper reporting that Gaddafi was hiding on church property in Tripoli. The apostolic vicar for the region, Bishop Giovanni Martinelli, denying those claims, however. Martinelli has repeatedly called for an end to the conflict in Libya through diplomatic means. Well, back in this country, thousands of Catholics are expected to converge on Detroit this weekend for two conferences with very different views on the future of the church. Earlier this week, Detroit Archbishop Alan Vigneron urged Catholics not to participate in one of the conferences, which is sponsored by an organization called the American Catholic Council. Now, the Archdiocese has informed Catholics that all of the invited keynote speakers there are either dissident from Catholic teaching or support those who dissent. The Detroit Free Press reporting that the Archdiocese is supporting a separate conference with speakers there who will explain the Church's views and critique the American Catholic Council. Well, a new survey shows that millennials, Americans between the ages of 18 and 29, are holding simultaneously pro-life and pro-choice views on the issue of abortion. The survey from the Public Religion Research Institute showing 52% of millennials say abortion is morally wrong, while 56% say it should be legal in all or most cases. The survey also showed that 40% of respondents say abortion should be illegal in all or most cases. Now, meanwhile, another survey showing Americans are pretty consistent when it comes to a belief in God. A new Gallup poll shows 92% of Americans do believe in God. That is down just 4 percentage points from when Gallup began surveying people on that belief back in the 1940s. On the most recent survey, 7% of Americans say they do not believe in God and 1% has no opinion. And some sad news to report. Less than a week after being honored by a Brooklyn parish, a former resident of the area has died. John Coughlin died after battling cancer. He was 78 years old. The Basilica of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Sunset Park honored Coughlin and his wife Mary this past Saturday for their work in making a soccer field at the parish a reality. And family and friends joined the Coughlins at the ceremony on the field. John Coughlin came to the U.S. from County Kerry in Ireland. He served in the U.S. Army and worked for the MTA. Stay tuned. There is much more currents ahead. Coming up, we'll go into the deep to discuss Pentecost.
Pentecost is the day where we remember that the Holy Spirit came upon the apostles and the disciples, fulfilling the promise of Jesus that he would not leave them orphans.
Welcome back. Well, it was like a scene straight out of the movies, which is fortunate because it works really well with today's cinematic theme here on the show. You'd think we planned this or something. So picture this. The disciples and a sizable group of men and women, including the Blessed Virgin Mary, were gathered in the upper room where Jesus had chosen to celebrate the Last Supper. Now, they were in deep prayer when all of a sudden a rush of wind and a sound filled the room and tongues of fire appeared over everyone's head. Now, didn't I tell you that was pretty dramatic? It sounds pretty darn dramatic. It would make a great big screen moment, right? Well, that moment is celebrated every year in the Catholic Church because it represents a very special anniversary that many people often refer to as the birthday of the Church. To learn more about this feast day and its continuing relevance to the Church today, I went into the deep with Brooklyn's own Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio to get those answers and more. Bishop DiMarzio, thanks for being here.
Good to be here again.
Really appreciate it. Well, of course, this Sunday is going to be kind of the end of one celebration, beginning of another. Tell us a little bit about the upcoming season that we're entering here.
Well, we're finishing the Easter season, and we will begin the ordinary time with Pentecost. At one time, Pentecost even had an octave. There was 8 days after Pentecost that we continued the Spirit, but that was a long time ago eliminated from the liturgical calendar. So kind of Pentecost is a real high point, then drops off. There's no follow-up, it seems. But it is a very important feast, obviously. It marks the coming of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles 50 days after Easter.
There we go. Well, bring us up to speed. Why is is Pentecost called Pentecost? Where does the name come from?
Well, Pentecost actually it's a Greek word, but it refers back to the Jewish Feast of Booths, which was celebrated around the same time after the Passover. So it really means 50, actually.
Okay, gotcha. Well, and bring us up, I know you gave us a little short version there of it, but bring us up to speed on the story of Pentecost and how it began.
Well, Pentecost is the day when we remember that the Holy Spirit came upon the apostles and the disciples. Mary obviously was present there, so that fulfilling the promise of Jesus that he would not leave them orphans, that he would come and with the Spirit, his Spirit, the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of Jesus, the third person of the Blessed Trinity, and would remain with the church till the end of time.
Sure. I think I asked a similar question to this one last time when we talked about Easter, but as to which is the more important, feast, is it Christmas or was it Easter? So if we could rank Pentecost somewhere in there with Christmas and Easter, where does it kind of rank as far as maybe importance or significance to the faith?
Well, probably it would come after Easter. It would be even before Christmas, if you want to look at. But they have very different purposes, I guess. But when you look at theologically, yes, probably we would say Pentecost would be the second most important feast in the liturgical life of the church.
Sure. And of course, Pentecost is often referred to as the church's birthday, I guess, for that reason, for the
right.
Holy Spirit coming down.
Yes.
So and this is an interesting question, I think, for a lot of people to understand. And a lot of people might be under the impression that all sacraments are received during the Easter Vigil. So why do people still receive sacraments on Pentecost?
Well, the Easter Vigil is for those people who are catechumens who have never received any of the sacraments. Gotcha. So they will receive all the sacraments at Easter. They would be baptized, they would be confirmed, and receive First Eucharist. Now, the custom has now been that those adults who have been catechized and have received baptism and Eucharist and have not received confirmation will be confirmed on the day of Pentecost by the priest of the parish, given permission by the bishop to do that. So it marks the Feast of Pentecost and gives the parish all a chance to see how the sacrament of confirmation comes to people.
Very good. And looking ahead on the liturgical calendar, what's the next big date the church prepares for?
Well, it's a long time in coming, I guess, when you're
in ordinary time.
Right, yeah, ordinary time for a long time. It goes until Advent. So
there we go. So we've
got
a
lot of
way.
ordinary time. That's the way life is. Very
That's
ordinary.
Right. Get out the green vestments and everything. Right. There you go. Well, Bishop DiMarzio, thank you so much.
Okay.
We appreciate your time.
Good to be here.
Stay with us. There is more Currents ahead. When we return, a legendary filmmaker takes on faith with a shadow of a doubt.
Is she acting responsibly? Perhaps not, and Hitchcock asks these questions of us.
Well, finally tonight, there was once a young lady who led a quiet life with her family in Santa Rosa, California. Well, this young lady decided that quiet family life was just a bit too quiet for her, and she was excited to learn that the uncle she was named after, Charlie, was coming to town. Now, in the hands of any other director, this might become one of those sort of, kind of mushy, feel-good movies. But in the hands of Alfred Hitchcock, yeah, I don't have to say it, it is the perfect setup to mayhem and perhaps even murder. The movie is called Shadow of a Doubt, and it's widely acknowledged as Hitchcock's favorite film. It was screened at Immaculate Conception Parish in Astoria, Queens during their May Film Festival, Alfred Hitchcock and the Catholic Conscience. Well, the plot is simple, but as is normally the case with Hitchcock, choosing between good and evil is always so complex.
We've done a number of film festivals. Last year we did Bergman and the Struggle for Faith. We try to highlight a director and relate them to the struggle of people to believe and have a good Catholic conscience. A great artist like Alfred Hitchcock tried to deal with some of these serious issues in his work. That there is right and there is wrong, and There is a process by which you come to those decisions.
Alfred Hitchcock made Shadow of a Doubt, a movie with very complex, layered characterizations, and in which, indeed, it isn't just bodies in danger, it's mainly souls in danger. The soul of a young girl.
Do you know the world is a foul sty? Do you know if you ripped the fronts off houses, you'd find swine?
Charlie comes to realize that evil is very close to her, and in fact, the person she feels closest to in life, her soulmate, is a completely evil person, a mass murderer, a serial killer. And to rid her family of his influence, she has to drive him out of the family.
I don't want you to touch my mother. So go away, I'm warning you. Go away or I'll kill you myself.
And she shows no regard whatsoever for the outside world, the widows in the future who might be killed by this widow killer, Uncle Charlie.
Your hands. Oh, let me go, Uncle Charlie. Let me go.
She only wants to save her own immediate family. Is she acting responsibly? Perhaps not, and Hitchcock asks these questions of us.
I thought the struggle with her faith was a very deep one, because it came to a point where she was wanted to kill her own uncle.
She wanted to do the right thing, but she was worried about her mother so much, and I understand that. I don't know what I would have done, but I know it would have been a struggle, and I think she did the right thing for her.
My biggest impression was how she was so disillusioned.
I come to the conclusion that I give up. I simply give up.
What are you going to give up?
If you ever stop to think that a family should be the most wonderful thing in the world, that this family's just gone to pieces?
All right. I think she's like all us human beings. We want to do the right thing, and maybe it takes a lifetime before you get to that point, because she was a young girl.
If a Catholic is brought up, as Hitchcock was, to know that evil is always at hand, then he or she is armed for this encounter with malevolence. Shadow, it seems to me, is among many things a Catholic criticism of the kind of mind that is without a true awareness of sin. Charlie, the heroine, comes to realize that evil is always close to us. Evil is always around the corner. Salvation is always around the corner. Damnation may be around the corner.
Always a message in those Hitchcock films, and always something that relates to faith in some way. I think his faith was obviously something that was very important in his faith background, very important to Alfred Hitchcock, and it definitely comes through in the films. And you see there where good and evil so clearly defined. It's amazing how he's able to tell that kind of a story, or how he was able to tell that kind of a story, I should say. And of course, the art lives on. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. And now that we've gotten you in the mood for some movies, you'll want to stay tuned for some primetime favorites. Well, there is no need to even get off the couch and go see a movie tonight. Just pop some popcorn, sit back, relax, and watch indie films of faith on Faith Film Festival at 8 p.m. But if you are just bound and determined to pay $15 for a Diet Coke, well, do not walk out the door until you've checked in with our movie critics on Real Faith. It comes up at 8:30 p.m. And you have my word, they will not steer you wrong. Well, I'd also like to take some time out here to congratulate the winners of our ticket giveaway. Some lucky couples are going to see the choir of the Diocese of Rome at Regina Pacis Church in Brooklyn tomorrow night, courtesy of Currents. And you winners out there, you are definitely in for something special. Very, very special, some great music there. Well, until Monday and another edition of Currents, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. We are also on Facebook and we are on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching and have a great night.